Hey friend, in this video I'm going to be showing how to do data validation the easier way inside of Canvas apps. A lot of the people that I train and that I work with tend to do, and how I used to do it honestly, was a lot complicated and messy, and the logic was all scattered throughout the app. So I'm going to show how to do it in a easier way, and the secret is named formulas. So I'm going to show how to use named formulas to do data validation. Let's switch over to my screen. And here we are in my little example app here that I like to play around with lots of things. And I wanted to show this concept, and then you can apply this concept to lots of other apps that you're building and lots of other times when you're needing to do data validation, specifically with forms. So this app right here is just a basic little form right here, and we have a save button. And if I click play, let me first show how this works, and then we'll show how I configured this all. So in our requested amount here, I'll type in 1000, and the due date, we'll set it to be the 10th. And email, I could put in an email, but notice how my button is now clickable, right? So I'm handling all of this logic inside of named formulas, and I'll kind of show how we do that and how you used to keep the logic all scattered. It's really complicated. But one thing I want to show here is if I do a higher number, if I do 2000, amount can't be greater than 1000. So that's a little rule that I have with my data validation here. And then you can see that save button now goes away. So let me hit X, and let's first cover how our named formulas are working. So if I go to app, go up here to the properties, and instead of on start, right, where we normally set lots of our other variables, we go to formulas here. And these named formulas are so awesome. I would totally suggest looking them up, playing around with them, figuring out how they really work. They are so great. They allow us to essentially create a variable that is always true. So the things inside of our variable, our named formula, are always being calculated. So I have a named formula called, let me just kind of explain how this works, NF controls. And this control, or this formula, is a table. And I think of this as these are all the controls or the fields inside of my form that I need to have data validation on. And I have just a simple field called name. What's the name of our field? What's the name of our control? I also have one called is valid, and I'll come back to that. And then I have one called show required. So show required is basically configuring, hey, is something required or not? Does it have the little red star? Does it not have the little red star next to it, right? And if you use the form control, that is much simpler than this, right? But the form control can only handle so much validation. It can't really actually handle that much. It can really only handle if something is required or not. Now, this is valid is basically saying, is this control valid or not? Is it good to go? And I'll explain that after I explain this next variable that has to do with this is valid property right here. So I have another variable called NF rules. So these are all the rules that are associated with my controls. So it could be that the due date must be greater than or equal to today. So how I do this is I say, hey, what's this rule? This rule is associated with the control called due date. So the due date control, notice how it's the same as this right here. I have a is not valid property. And this is basically saying what would make this rule be broken? Why would this rule not be valid, right? And so I just say, hey, when is this not valid? Well, this rule is not valid when the due date is less than or equal to today, because that wouldn't really make sense, right? Um, if we want it to show a error message, I have our little error message field here. Due date must be greater than today. So we'll see how to configure all of this. And this, it might be seeming a little complicated and a little weird. I totally suggest working with this, trying this out for yourself, and you will realize this is so much easier, right? Because all of the logic is all right here, right in this one place, right? And I'll have configured my controls and my submit button So if I need to add new rules, take them away, right? Or I just need to see, hey, when can I submit this form, right? I'm coming back to my app and I want to see how I can submit my form, or what did I do? Um, and I haven't been in my app in a long time, right? I can just come to this one place and see all of this information. It's so helpful. So the next few rules I have, so I have a rule for amount. Hey, the value must be greater than, or the value, if the value is greater than 1,000, can't do that. So amount can't be greater than 1,000. And also the amount field can't be blank, right? So that's another rule that I've set. So I've set that 2 rules for the same control. So if I come all the way up here and look at this is valid property, all this is really doing is just checking, hey, go find all of the rules where the control is the same as this one. So go find all the rules for this control that I'm on right here and find them that are broken. So where that is not valid is true. So that means something's wrong. If that is empty, it's a lot of double negatives, it's very strange. But you can just copy what I've done here, right? If that's helpful. If that is empty, that means there's no rules that are broken, and that means this is now valid. And I do that same thing for every control, right? So this is the exact same thing. The control is just looking at the due date now. And so I use this field to show if that control is red or not. The border around it is red or not, right? So that can be really helpful. Finally, the last one that I do is NF for name formula is form valid. And that just says, similar to up here, it just says, hey, are there any rules that are broken? If there's not, so if that filter is empty, then form must be valid. There are no rules that are broken, so we must be good to go. And so I'm using this with the submit button to show if it's editable or not. And this is my menu and so on and so forth. So right here, everything right here, this is all the logic that I have to do my form validation, right? It's so helpful. I started playing around with this and I thought, is this possible? Could this make things so much easier? And I tried a few different ways of doing this, and this one having 2 different tables, one table for the control, one table for the rules, one table or one variable to just to say, hey, is the whole thing valid or not? This was the best thing that I could come up with. It is so nice. I love this so much. So if you're like me, sometimes you have forms that are just crazy, right? You might need to add a few other fields, and that's totally okay if you want to make this a little more customizable, right? So we'll talk about that at the end. So let's show how we configure all of this. So I'll come down here, and first let's just look at our little red asterisk or red star. And all I have is just it's just a label, right? It's just red. And I go to the visible property, and I'm just using our lookup formula, going to that controls table, finding the control where the name of it is equal to amount, and getting the show required property. So this is either true or false. So I come back here, go over right here. It's finding this item right here where the name is equal to amount, right? And it's getting that show required field, which is true. So that's why you can see that. So if I change this to false, come up here, the red asterisk is now gone. So that's kind of neat. So the other thing that I'll do, it's just a few places where we've configured this, is in the border color. So if this is red, now remember, this is where it starts to get crazy, where your logic starts to get spread out across your whole form. If I go to the border color right here, click on this, and okay, good, you can still see that. I know I get in the way, my little screen gets in the way sometimes. You can see all I have in here is, okay, go find that control where the amount, where the name is equal to amount. And this time just get the is valid property, right? Which we know is, hey, are there any rules that are broken for this control? And all it does, so I could add more rules, I could take them away. All this is doing is just saying, hey, check if that's valid. If it is, okay, it's good. So if it is valid, it'll be black. If it isn't valid, if this is false, then it'll be red. So right now it's red because there's a rule that's broken because it's over 2,000, right? It can't be over. I set a rule that this field can't be over 2,000 or can't be over 1,000. And that's that. So that's really awesome. It's really easy. The awesome part about this is if I want to use this control again, and I'm creating my form, right? I could copy this control and paste it, and then I can just change this right here, right? And I just say, hey, change this to the details field or whatever it is, right? And that just configures it and ties everything to our table. And then I add all my rules and controls and everything all right here in this one place, right? So you still have to do the work, but it's just how you're doing it, how you're organizing it. So much easier. Oh my goodness. Um, Now the next thing I'll show is this little error message here. This one's a little bit different. This one's looking up the rules table. It's looking up the rules table where the control is equal to amount. So it's finding any rule, there might be more than one, right? In this case, there's two, that has where the control is equal to amount, and where the is not valid is set to true. So if this is broken and the control is the amount, and this rule is broken, right, is not valid is equal to true, get the error message for that rule, right? So that's why I wanted to have a little bit two separate tables. I needed to have a table for the rules to say, hey, there's this rule broken. Well, you might want to have a different error message depending on what rule has been broken, right? Is the amount field blank? So I actually don't have an error message for that, but I could say, hey, this cannot be blank. And I have a rule that it can't be over 1,000. So I might want to say something different to the user depending on what the rule that they're breaking is, right? So if I go like this and I click play, right now I'm breaking the rule that it's over 2,000. But if I hit backspace, now I'm breaking the rule where it can't be blank. And so I want to display a different error message, and that's how I can do that. Or like you saw, I can leave it blank. But all this is doing is it's finding the first rule that's been broken. Um, and so that's getting the error message for that. So that's super easy. Again, right? If I want to show this on another field, and I'm adding my fields here, I can just copy like all of this, even the little red asterisk, right? And then I would just paste this down here and change this to, hey, instead of the amount field, change it to the description field or the notes field or whatever that is, right? And so that can be really helpful. And that's how I like to do my forms. I set up a few of the fields and then I just copy and paste them and change them how I need to. Um, and that makes this so much easier. So that's really awesome. The last thing that I will show, and then I'll show modern controls because they're a little bit different, is our submit button right here. So I have a display mode. This is where the logic used to always get way crazy too, right? So this is where you would handle, hey, like if any of the rules are broken, then the display mode is disabled, right? Or maybe you're turning off the visibility for this button or something, right? So that's where you start to write the rules two places, maybe even three, right? So I might have how I used to do it, is I'd have like for this example right here, this field cannot be blank. Well, I'd have to do logic and say, hey, this label is visible if this is blank. And I'd have to configure that logic. And then I'd have to say, hey, this control, the red border, is red if this control is blank. And then I'd have that same logic, hey, if this control is blank, then the display mode is disabled, right? So I'm adding that, I'm creating that rule that this field can't be blank, and I'm typing in that rule three different places, one for the red border, one for the error message, one for the submit button to make sure they can't click submit until this field isn't blank, right? Until it's been filled out. So if that made sense, I'm adding in that same rule right here, three times. That's how I used to have to do this. Now I'm just doing it once. So that's the really awesome part about this. And then all I'm doing is referencing that variable that we had created. The NF is form valid. This is true if all of those fields, or all those rules are valid. If that's true, that means the form's good to go and it's in edit mode. If it's not true, it's disabled. So I'll show that real quick one more time over here in our app. if you ever want to get to the app, you can click here in this dotted land, and then go to, oh, no, that's the screen. Sorry. That's the screen properties. Okay. If we go to app and then formulas. Okay. All right. So now we'll scroll this down right here. So this is that variable right there, or that named formula is empty, filter, NF rules is not valid, right? So I'm just checking again, are any of the rules broken? If there are none broken, that means this is empty and this will be set to true, right? A little bit of double negatives, right? There's a little bit of complexity here, right? And I'm not going to spend an hour explaining all this in a lot of detail, right? I think the best thing to do is copy what I've done, change your rules, change your fields that you're using, start to play around with how this is working, especially, and this happens all the time, right? You're watching a YouTube video and you're like, oh, that's great, Ben, but that doesn't work for my scenario, right? If that's the case, I've done that a million times. I'm like, this video is great, but I need it more complicated. So here's where it gets a little more complicated, and I'll also show modern controls as well. Is if sometimes when you're doing a multi-stage form, you have multiple rules that are only true or only needing to be valid or not, depending on what stage the form is in. So you might have a form where the amount field is required when I'm first submitting it, but then when the second person gets to it, the approver or something, right? The due date is now required, and so I could start to add in that logic. Maybe I add in a form stage or something field, right? So I could start to add in some of that logic if I needed to, if I need to make this more complex. If you'd like me to do a video on that, that'd be great. You can let me know. But that can be a really awesome thing. The main idea here is you're using named formulas to control and manage your different rules that you have for your form. This is so much more efficient, so much nicer, a lot easier to deal with, and a lot easier for people to understand too that are coming to work in your app or your future self. So your future self will thank you for using this. Okay, last thing I want to cover, and let's do a modern text input control here. So we'll go right here. And remember, if you don't have these turned on, you can go to settings, updates, make sure modern controls and themes are turned on so you can get access to these. But these are a little bit different. I can change the border color, but they also have a really cool property if I go over here to advanced, and it's just called validation state. Click on that. If it's none, it's not red or anything, right? The other option here I can do is error. Just type in the text error. And now if I hit play, this is now red. So now I can come here to this control and we'll copy our logic. And we'll just copy this all right here. Come down here, say, hey, the validation state is either none or error. I'll say, hey, if find that control, the amount control, check it if it's valid. If it is valid, then I will do the none. Oh, none. If it's not valid, I will do error. And there you go. So now this is kind of weird. This one's tied to this one right now. But if I type in like $100 or whatever, now it's going away, right? Its validation has been set to that. So that's it for the video. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments. If you're looking for training for you or your company, check my website down below. I've got lots of different live trainings and mentorship programs that can be really, really helpful to get you learning all of these awesome things to become a pro app developer. I've trained thousands of people. It's been one of my favorite things to do. So if you're looking for training or you're looking for help with building an app, reach out to me. I'll put my info down below in the description. And thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.